Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in this beautiful place we call Metro Detroit. I am Jer Stays, coming to you from the Daily Detroit studio in Techtown. Across the table from me is none other than
Norris Howard. You know I'm back once again.
We can't get rid of you.
No, and you never will.
Not even if we send you down to the basement, if you ask where your red stapler is?
No, it's not happening.
By the way, that's a Office Space reference.
It is.
I don't know is Office Space still relevant?
No, because people don't work in offices.
Man, that was a movie.
It was.
I've been to parties. Mm-hmm. There were Office Space parties where people just dressed up. They brought red staplers. It was like a cult.
It's the firmly Gen X thing to do, Jer.
This is where my elder millennialness kind of hits.
Yeah. Did you like Clerks too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I've seen Kevin Smith like 6 times in person in Detroit, second row.
Oh man. Yeah, you older than me.
I think actually, am I old? Yes. I think I'm the oldest of all of you, which is terrifying.
That's okay. This is why we entrust you with leadership and a consistency of power.
I am often the oldest here, but the youngest when I go cover policy events.
Facts. Hard facts.
I got word, by the way, and I think I want to talk about a little bit, that Eminem is going to have a new album. Dr. Dre talked about it on the Jimmy Kimmel Show.
All right.
Are we excited? First album in 4 years. And I feel like Eminem is very beloved in Metro Detroit, but also like, it's like that whole thing where you have like 85% of people who like something and 15% are like, hell no.
No, listen, you can like or not like his music. He's one of the greatest of all time, period. He is one of the most technically proficient rappers to ever live. He is a style onto his own. I would consider myself a great hip hop head. I still listen to a ton of albums. New rap infuriates me nowadays. I've been listening to so much old stuff, including a lot of old Eminem, a lot of old De La Soul and stuff like that. It's just better. It's just better. It's purer. It's more unique.
Who's the old man now?
I am old, and I'll take that. One thing in terms of hip hop that I love about Detroit, and I include Eminem in this, is Detroit is probably the last place in America where the rap sounds unique. Rap from Detroit don't sound like rap from nowhere else. Only Detroit rap sounds that way. And I just feel like that's why I still listen to a lot of local stuff. Like I'm still listening to like a lot of Peasy and Side Eye Baby. I'm still listening to Baby Tron and stuff like that. Like I'm listening to these cats because that music is so different than the music that every other rapper is making. That is just, I love it. That's part of why I love our music scene here.
I'm glad to see also that Dr. Dre is going to have some stuff on this album, which of course I'm excited about. Now, I wonder though, I got to say, I feel like there isn't enough coverage of the music scene in Detroit. I feel like, and this is not as hate to the other side, but I feel like there's a lot of nostalgia for your Iggy Pops and that part of section of Detroit music, MC5, whatever. But Dilla, great. Look, there is a Dilla book right over there. Dan Charnas is a friend of the show. Like, I love it. But like, I don't feel like there is enough coverage locally of our music scene just in general and specifically what you are talking about and the fresh things coming out of there.
Because, all right.
Is it because people like me run the things?
Yes, that's number one. But number two, a lot of this came about in what I like to call in the dark years, the takeover bankruptcy era of Detroit, right? A lot of these artists really started getting their feet wet then and a little bit later. Danny Brown gets a lot of love here. And obviously there's Big Sean, who's probably the most commercial of all of them. And I don't mean that as a knock. But the thing about it is that when I think about Detroit music beyond what you said, like Motown and Iggy Pop and all the rest of them, I think about Ghetto Tech and like DJ Assault and DJ Godfather and all them type of cats.
We don't get enough love for our techno either, or say DJ Stacey Hot Wax Hale.
Yes.
Terrence Parker.
Or Wax Tax and Dre. And like all these types of people. That's who I originally
Detroit
think
Techno
of.
Militia.
Yes, that's who I originally think of when I think about Detroit music. And then it goes into the early 2000s into now of rappers of like Blay Icewood and Eastside Cheddar Boys and all the rest of those guys, Doughboys Cash Out and all those guys, they don't get a lot of coverage, I think, specifically because those artists did not participate in the homogenization of hip hop, right? They didn't start rapping like Drake, or they didn't start rapping like Migos, or they didn't start rapping like whoever the popular artist was at the time. They just retained this fierce regionalism, and that kind of, I think, hurt some of their appeal.
I feel like the timing is also off because so much has moved to Instagram and social media where you will see this stuff. Because with music in general being consumed on platforms like Spotify or whatever, I think it lowered the stakes for music coverage, because it used to be, all right, I need to go somewhere to learn about something because I'm about to drop $15, $20, $25, $30 on an album, a vinyl, or whatever. And now with Spotify, there's no stakes. And so with those stakes removed, I feel like there's been less of that incentive of, you know what, I really want to support that music publication because it's going to save me money or it's going to help direct me into something new, as opposed to before where, look, I loved all the magazines. I was so into that, and I used that to help guide it. It was part of the fandom of like, what am I going to buy?
Yeah.
Again, old man speaking here.
No. And that's facts. I think another big factor, and this is my generation's fault, and I completely take responsibility for
Damn
it,
millennials.
is that, you know, when the internet came about and the mixtape era hit super hard, certain artists took super advantage of that. Like, you know, the Lil Waynes and the Currencies and the J. Coles of the world. They put out, you know, these mixtapes, Wiz Khalifa, all these mixtapes back to back, and just kind of saturated hip hop with everything. Just all this content that they put out ostensibly for free. And if you weren't doing that in the late 2000s, early 2010s, you could not be a part of the conversation. And so the magazines became irrelevant, and social media wasn't what it is now. So there's kind of this weird period, especially I think for Detroit artists, and that's why Big Sean actually did get as popular as he did, is because he took advantage of that mixtape era. And a lot of these other artists simply did not. I'm excited to hear M's new album. I'm happy that Dre is on it. I think that I always love and appreciate an artist that sticks to who they are and what they are and doesn't necessarily try to hop on trends or anything like that. Eminem is who he is who he's always been. I'm kind of looking forward to it because at bare minimum, we know it's going to be some rapping ass rap on it. I'm always okay with that.
Let's change gears here.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a really bad segue because we're about to talk about cars.
Oh, God. Jer.
Look, I'm in my dad joke era. Wait a second. My dad joke era started 25 years ago.
That was not great. You've had better.
I've had a few better.
You've had better.
All right. So here's the deal. I want to take a victory lap right now.
Okay.
I was told by a listener just yesterday, coming over to this very studio in beautiful tech town, that we don't do enough tooting of our own horn. That maybe we're a little too humble with things.
Okay. Well, after coming off the rap segment, then yeah, we the best. We are the best podcast in the whole city.
And another one.
Another one.
Hybrids. I called it. I could go look for the tape, but I called it. People are going to want hybrids. This whole thing from 2020 on, I got hate mail. I got people from the industry telling me that I'm an idiot, all these other things. But I was like, look, people want to do well. They want to help the world, but they also don't want to feel completely limited.
Yeah. And
I was like, hybrids are the future. I know it's more complex. I know there are issues with it. I've driven a number of hybrids. That is the answer, whether it's the battery electric or the plug-in or whatever. Some form of hybrid is the future. And what are we seeing, Mr. Norris Howard?
Yeah. Today, the Biden administration released a new series of tailpipe pollution limits coming through the EPA. Essentially, what this is going to do is kind of hamstring the automakers and force them into making more hybrids and making more EVs. And this is a little bit different than the previous legislation that they put out, which was a little bit extreme, I would say. It was going to be a little bit difficult to get the major automakers in America to flip to EV completely by 2030. I think that was very ambitious. But just increasing them essentially means that you're going to have to make hybrids. And it seems like that's what the automakers are more in favor of doing.
I think they're more in favor of it because that's what they're actually able to sell. Because EV sales, look, they're still there. It is a misnomer to say that they've gone completely away.
Yeah.
There's still EV sales. But there's a statistic I wanted to highlight out of a Reuters report that in February, hybrids sales in the U.S. grew 5 times faster than EVs, and a plug-in hybrid of the Jeep Wrangler SUV accounted for half of total U.S. Wrangler sales in the second half of 2023, up from 37% in the first half. let me tell you, it's what people want to do. It gives them the freedom that they want, but also, hey, I'm going to sip some of that electric juice. I'm going to have the range that I need. I drove a Chevy Volt for a while. I enjoyed it. And you know what? I so rarely needed gas, but when I needed gas, it was there. Like if I get a hold of like one of those Bolts or one of the Ford electrics or something, I'm just saying, like, there is something special about that hybrid flexibility.
It is. Essentially, people who decide to be vegetarian or eat vegan a couple days a week as opposed to completely cutting meat out of their diet 100%. Very few people are going to go cold turkey like that, right?
Ford hybrid sales are up nearly 37%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Toyota's been cornering this market for a while because for a while it's the only one you could really buy.
The Prius.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is that, people do want the ability to be able to do either or, a combination of the two. But the biggest thing, and this is actually something that I hear even from my contacts within the auto industry, is that the infrastructure can't sustain what the administration wants, right? What the administration wants is this full EV adoption that quite literally they cannot build the infrastructure that fast. We don't even have the sort of legislative foundation to be able to say, where do you put the plugins? Do you put them at gas stations that already exist? Then who owns electric pumps? Then
and how do the gas stations make money?
How do the gas stations make money? Because then we hear, oh, well, the Standard is actually owned by Tesla. So now Ford and GM vehicles can use Tesla's charging standard. So does Tesla get the money? Does BP,
who pays for that infrastructure to go in there to replace those gas tanks, to do all that stuff?
Right. And so there's so much, legalese that we're going to have to go through before we can even get to a point of electric charging stations across, interstates in America. And people just say, hybrid is what makes me feel safer, what makes me feel more comfortable, knowing that I can run on gas once my battery dies, and I'll be okay.
Now, how we get there is going to be an open question.
Yeah.
Because you go back to the old days, and the federal government had to get involved with electrification of the country. And I can't help but think that the federal government is going to have to get involved with the electrification of gas stations or whatever we're going to do. There's so much economic disruption with this because, frankly, you're not going to need as many gas stations.
No.
Because a lot of people are going to be charging from home.
Yep.
People are going to be charging from work. We've had people who actually lobby for gas stations on this show where they're like, hey, where do we sit in this whole thing?
And they're going to fight tooth and nail.
They're going to fight tooth and nail. Absolutely.
Who wouldn't? This is your livelihood. We definitely will have to rethink in the same conversations that we have with AI and white collar work. We are going to have to rethink what it is that we value in our transportation needs. We even talk about, infrastructure and building more rail and things like that, or bus rapid transit. All of that means less gas stations. All of that means less auto body shops. All of that means less transmission shops. All of that means all this stuff.
And it means less in road taxes.
Yes.
Taxes for roads and revenue for roads across the country, which we also have to account for, which gets into other thorny issues.
Exactly. So, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm down on this because ultimately this is done in order to protect our Mother Earth and keep it from, exploding upon us like it decides to do from time to time.
I think we're both in agreement that there is a climate crisis.
Absolutely.
But there has to be reasonable ways that we can get there. And I can hear in my head the inbox where people are like, hey, we need to take action quickly. And I don't disagree with you as somebody who literally walks to work when I can, right? But also you need the ability. We have a thing coming up in June. I got to be able to drive there because there's no look, there should be a train to where I'm going.
Yeah.
There is no train to where I'm going. There's no viable other way than driving, leaving the car in the parking lot for 5 days, which is a total waste of resources. But in the real world, there's no other way to do this. And so a lot of people have to work. We have to somehow blend the real world with what our goals are.
Yeah, and I think people also need to be realistic. And I think this is the administration almost copping up to it, saying like, what we said before was a little crazy. This is something that is a bit more doable for everybody. And I think ultimately this is a net positive. If you're somebody who still says it doesn't go far enough or it doesn't solve the climate crisis, well, we're not going to be able to solve the climate crisis, honestly, with just vehicle regulations. Every person in America could drive an EV tomorrow, and we still would have a climate crisis because we haven't talked about mass polluters in forestry industry. We haven't talked about mass polluters abroad in countries we do not control. We haven't talked about mass polluters of corporations. We haven't talked about the meat packing industry that produces so much methane gas that really it almost invalidates whatever efforts we do from an automotive point of view.
Not that we shouldn't continue to do it.
Right.
It's going to take multiple solutions,
Exactly.
I think, is the takeaway.
Exactly. And my point is that for those who are very, very adamant and very forceful at the administration over this particular issue, I still think it's multifaceted, but this is a step in the right direction to getting most people to go, okay, that's cool, let's do it.
Let's close the show with a topic that a good portion of our listeners are going to be like, nah, we don't believe you. No, it doesn't matter that we're losing population, but there's a stunning number that came out. Wayne County is one of the top 10 population losing counties in America since 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne County, including the city of Detroit.
Yep.
50,000 people have hit the door, according to census estimates.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people are going to fight those census estimates, whatever.
It's the numbers we got, guys. Like, it's fine. It's the numbers we got.
But you can see it in the investment. You can see it in other things. At what point do people care that we're going to actually do something about this? I feel like we've had this same conversation since the show has started.
Yeah, it's because there's a veneer, there's a wool that is pulled over everybody's eyes when it comes to the parts of Detroit that everybody goes to and is in, right? Downtown, guess what? Downtown is fine. Downtown is growing. Courttown is fine. Courttown is growing. Midtown is fine. Midtown is growing. But those are, in landmass terms, you could argue that that's not even a quarter of the city. If we're talking about land, if we're talking about how big the city actually is.
But we're also talking about the counties. We're talking about this as a regional issue, Norris.
Yeah.
Oakland County is not seeing growth. You see some in Macomb County, but Macomb County is a smaller area. You're looking at all of Wayne County here. We're talking about this as a regional problem. I think it's important that we have a regional lens to it because economically we're all in this together. And if you look at successful regions, when we have guests on the show talking about it, they're like, that's what successful regions do. They think about it all together because we have to. Because look, let's be honest, 85% of the population in this region is not in the city of Detroit.
Tell me then, how much Livonia wants to cooperate with the city of Detroit?
The question though becomes,
because that's the only way it works, Jer. That's the only way it works. If Canton and Livonia and Westland and Retford and all the rest of
So what does that cooperation look like though? Like in real terms?
I think you have to invest, number one, in what the people are asking for. One of the biggest things people are asking for is transit. That's one of the big things.
A lot of people will say transit doesn't matter.
That's a lie, because when you lack the free-flowing movement of people, then you make it harder for jobs to retain talent.
And at the end of the day, this is a brain drain. The area is
leaving.
The talent is leaving. The people are getting older.
Yes.
Far older. We've seen the signs of it. If you wonder about new openings and things, businesses don't invest where things are shrinking.
No. And why would they? And that's another one of the big things. And this is what I've always said, and people have always decided to sort of conveniently not listen to it. But talented people who want to open businesses, people who want to open stores and shops and restaurants, guess where they don't want it to do? They don't want to do that kind of stuff in sleepy suburban towns. They don't want to do it. They want to be in cities where there's foot traffic, where there's money, where there's people who may discover it by mistake, where the critics are going to come to, the population centers. That is where people are going to want to invest. And so I've said for many years, so goes the city of Detroit, so goes this region. Every time that we've seen reports of the city of Detroit losing population, it is then coupled in the next year or two by both Oakland County and the rest of Wayne County losing population. Why? Because the jobs. It's the economy, stupid.
People go where they have economic opportunity, but also we talked about this whole, work from home thing. People have a lot of options now.
Yeah. If you're telling me I can get a job from a firm, let's say a marketing firm in New York, and they told me, based on where you live, you can make more or less. I've seen this in the hiring process. They'll say, hey, for New York, this job is making $110,000, and in Michigan, it's making $85,000. Well, guess what I'm doing? I'm going to take my butt to New York. I don't have to live in the city, but I can live in the state of New York. I can live in Albany. I could live somewhere else. I could live in Long Island somewhere and make more money. Or I could choose to fart off to the West Coast or down south somewhere where I'm paying significantly less taxes and live my life there and continue to just count my checks, get my money up. And I don't even have to deal with population being lost and the dysfunction of some of the legislatures in these cities and in the state. It just continues to frustrate me as a native because we're not being honest with ourselves about this. We have to if we want it to get better.
I want to do an episode on this specifically about Michelin stars, but I saw a lot of feedback. You know, a piece I saw was like, why don't we have Michelin in Michigan or Metro Detroit? And of course, it's because we don't pay for it, right? Like your convention bureaus, your state, whatever's pay for it so it opens the door. But a lot of people are like, oh, we don't need that. But a lot of people who work in the industry highlighted something I didn't really think about. It's the pursuit of the Michelin star is about making your place better. It's not really about just the star.
No.
It's about the pursuit and the improvement. And I'm really tired of Midwest inexceptionalism.
Yeah, I am too.
What we need to do is we need to get past the cultural barrier of Midwest inexceptionalism like other cities are doing, because there's no reason we can't. It's us.
Yeah.
Like, I think we want to look for an outside reason, but like, look, the reality is that like it would have been a lot easier to start Daily Detroit in another city. I was offered resources to do that. And we're here. Because at the end of the day, there's growing younger populations for what we serve. If people don't realize, most of our audience is under 50. This is a market that's actually shrinking.
Yeah.
In the possible service area. Now, we have a lot more that we could do. And I want to be at the center of the change and of pushing for better. And I think that's crucial. But we need to look at the idea of like, oh, well, this is just fine. Or this defeatism that I keep hearing over and over again. I remember hearing it around the changes at Woodward. And not about specifically. So in Ferndale, at Woodward, they added bike lanes, whatever. It wasn't specifically about the changes happening. It's that there's no point in doing anything. There's no point in trying. That's what I heard more often than not. And that just piss me off.
Yeah, and this is how I feel about the whole thing, and that's why I get frustrated, because not only is it in exceptionalism, right? Like I look at a restaurant like Freya or Oak and Rio, right? That place almost shouldn't be in Detroit and how good it is in terms of the service, in terms of the quality of the food, in terms of the entire experience of what it is. And it definitely is crazy that it's on West Grand Boulevard, kind of
it is
off
literally
the beaten path.
And when you say Detroit, I don't even just say city. Like I say that in like a regional context. There's a lot of restaurants in Detroit and some in Metro Detroit too that you're like, wow, this stands right up there. And frankly, they deserve some sort of recognition.
Hey, don't get me wrong. I love the fact that it's there. I've been multiple times. I don't care how much it freaking costs. It's great, right? And I'm paying for that experience. But the thing about it is that so many other places, so many other restaurants, so many other, rental spaces or hotels until fairly recently just looked at it and said, well, we're just here. And since we're here, this is all we're going to do. And I wholly reject that. When I talk to people younger than me, when I travel, when I, talk about what I do, and I hear why young people have decided to live in these cities, why they've decided to move to these cities, and then I talk about Detroit. One of the main reasons why they move is they say, it's cool. I like it. I can do everything I want. I don't have to own a car. Everything I need is in my little 2 square mile
Or even if you
area.
do, you don't have to go 40 minutes to something.
Yeah, everything I need is right here. And we are so used to the fact that you have to get in a car and drive 45 minutes to do anything in Metro Detroit that we don't realize that's one of the largest factors as to why people don't want to come here. We have to fix that aspect of our daily lives and how we choose to continue to build our city and build our communities, that if we don't change something like that very, very soon, it's going to reach critical mass or lack thereof, and it's going to be a serious issue.
Well, I think it already is a serious issue, and I think there's various nodes around town that could be focused on, because there's going to be people who don't live in the city, obviously,
That's
for
fine.
for multiple reasons.
Yeah, but we're talking about like Wayne County in general.
Yeah, or Oakland County,
Yeah.
or places that have interest, and maybe even connecting these areas in a greater sense where it's not like a stop every block, but hey, you know what? If I want to roll up to Royal Oak right now, instead of hopping in the car, just step out the door and I'm there, or looking at things, one of the things I appreciate about Mayor Mike Duggan, 20-minute neighborhoods. Kind of love that idea.
That's what you should have.
I would love if I had a 20-minute neighborhood with more than like the dollar store.
Yeah, and you know, it's going to be really difficult to do this in the city proper, obviously, because of the economics currently. But
I think it's also going to be difficult to do it in the suburbs because of NIMBYism, not in my backyardism.
Yes.
Which is a big thing here.
Yes, it's a huge thing. And that's the part that I think continues to frustrate me. Listen, a new store is going up 4 doors down from me, and I'm incredibly excited about it. But I've heard people in the neighborhood saying how much is going to increase traffic and how all the teenagers are going to be hanging there. And I'm just like, God, you people are so frustrating. You're so frustrating. All you want to do is sit in the house and get old and crusty and not have any sort of vibrance in your neighborhood. And I'm tired of it. And it's what we're seeing across this entire region. The only places outside of obviously the neighborhoods I mentioned in Detroit and a few other pockets around Metro Detroit is I'm just tired of people who don't want any life and vibrance around them. I'm sick of it. I don't want to hear about no gated communities. I hate cul-de-sacs. I hate it all. I want there to be density. I want there to be people who can walk their neighborhoods and be able to do everything they could conceive of. I'm tired of it here.
Do we need to create a policy that is a focus zone? Do we? Because this is the hardest thing.
Yes.
So I've got a few different criticisms at this point of the Michigan growing together thing that seems to have faded out of the news. One of them is that thinking that everyone has to be on board. And in reality, I don't think that's the answer. I think that what we need to do is pick some areas that are going to be on board so that the people like you and me and a number of our listeners and those who want to be part of a more hopping or focused area, this is what we're going to do. It's so politically unpopular, but I don't think that's the actual answer.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but like there's a reason why the areas around what Dan Gilbert's been doing and everything else work is because he knew the focus, and it's extremely politically unpopular, but it works.
It works. Let's just keep it funky. All right. And address the elephant in the room. Okay. We gonna need a lot more people, a lot more cultures living in the city proper, and a lot of those people in the suburbs gonna need to get over the fact that Black and brown people are gonna live next to you. Like we gotta stop. I've talked to my friends about this, to my wife about this, who is not from here.
Now you get a lot of criticism for race coming into everything for you.
I don't care because it's true. This is one of the most segregated regions in the country. We've done it by design, but we've also done it to ourselves. There's no conceivable reason as to why that needs to continue now.
Thomas Agrew's Origin of the Urban Crisis, big, thick book, good book.
Great book.
Definitely a bit older now, but has a really interesting point. When a neighborhood turns 20% of a minority, the majority leaves.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. There are always exceptions to every rule. I know we're going to get listeners who say that.
But if this is going to succeed and we're going to create focus zones within Wayne County, if we're going to take, let's say, Redford, for instance, right? If we're going to say Redford is now a focus zone and we're going to put heavy investment into Redford, we're going to revitalize the intersection of 5 Mile and Beach Daily. And we're going to turn that into a huge commercial zone. We're going to have some high-rise apartments. We're going to rebuild the library, all this kind of stuff. This is what we're going to do. You have to get everybody to buy in. And that means the people who already live there, many of them who are Black, many of them who are white, you're going to have to get new people to want to move there. And you're going to have to say you can do everything in Redford and you don't have to leave this town to do everything you possibly could want to do. And that's going to require time, money, cooperation. And I think 3 of those 2 we don't have.
My thing, and I'm going to say the city because that's me and that's where I am and it's where I know the most. I think we should have a goal to get 600,000 people living in the old city borders of Detroit, because the last time the city was this population, it was 1910.
Yeah.
And the city stopped at Highland Park. The city stopped a little bit around Belle Isle, and the city stopped. Like, obviously, we're not going to like force people to move or anything like that, but there needs to be a density goal, a honest thing to be like, hey, you know what? Let's go back to at least 1910 and do it better. Don't get me wrong. The 1910 wasn't perfect at all. Well, just be careful. This is not rose-colored glasses, but as far as having people and things happening, maybe that should be a stated goal to say, you know what, we want to honestly add.
And get some tax incentives.
So this is what maddens me about things like city council. They'll talk about things like we need to have 3-bedroom apartments and single-family houses. You have to address the core issues of why those aren't being built.
Yeah, because nobody wants to pay those taxes.
And the deal is better in the suburbs. If you're a family, for many people, not everyone, when you see people go and you see it and I see it and I've watched it for 25 years, kid comes, goodbye.
Yeah. Schools and taxes.
9 times out of 10, kids come, goodbye.
Schools and taxes. These are the issues. But if you sit down and you say, listen, the tax burden, we will alleviate, at least for the first 10 years. You buy a house in this area, your tax burden.
Well, that's kind of like the NEZ, the neighborhood enterprise zone, which people don't like. I would rather see the whole thing come down.
Yeah.
I'd rather see a wholesale lowering.
It's not going to happen, though.
I think there's people who like the political value in deciding who wins and who loses.
Yeah.
They like that power seat.
They do. But the thing about it is we need somebody winning.
Here is the thing. What we're doing isn't working.
Right. So we need
But it seems like to a lot of people, when I talk out in the public, they think everything's fine.
No. There are pockets of this city that we could right now say, all right, if you live within this 5 or 6 square mile zone, we are going to, for all new residents or all new builders, you're going to have an alleviated tax burden because we are going to try to increase density in this area. Now, is that quote unquote fair? Maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the day, you need people living here. And the more people live here, guess what? Everybody pays less taxes.
So that's the other thing that we're not getting into. Whether it's in the city of Detroit or the suburbs, we continually build out, and all these things cost more to maintain over time, that these costs are all increasing to fewer people.
Yep.
So the fewer people are paying more, are going to have to pay more.
And that's what I mean. If I had a choice right now, today, because I'm not in the city proper, but I am in Wayne County. If I had a choice today for somebody to say, all right, Norris, here's a home you could buy in one of these revitalization zones. You could get in cheap. Your tax responsibility will be lower. Oh, and by the way, we're going to build a new school in 5 years after we see how many people moved here. If we reach this threshold, new elementary school.
Or what if we focus around areas that have schools?
Right. Well, all 5 of them. But anyway, but
you say that as a DPS grad who has lost your schools.
Exactly. But you say, all right, we reach this threshold, we build a store. You incentivize the community itself to invest within the community to access the amenities. These are the things that I think, and obviously I'm not an urban planner, I'm not a tax expert, I'm not any of that stuff. But in my mind, I just go, if I had an incentive to come in and invest in the city because I saw that there was a 10, 15, 20-year plan for what to do with this neighborhood,
and we're coming up,
do it.
And we're coming up on that master plan. They're talking about that thing. And I think it's important to engage with that and do that.
I mean, we saw it in Midtown. Midtown came together, and we can argue whether we like it, don't like it, whatever. But Midtown put together a nonprofit who had a plan for what they wanted to do with the area, and it became the area that it is now.
Upon reflection, because I had some criticisms early on, I think a lot of the pushback has been about the lack of liking of change and not about what actually happened.
Yeah, it just frustrates me, man. It frustrates me. I think there's a lot more the city can be doing. There's a lot more the region can be doing. And I think the more we continue to lean on old solutions for tomorrow's problems, we're not going to see this region continue to grow. And I hate to say it because I would love if I could live and die in this region. But does that make economic sense for me? I don't know. And I hate that I don't know.
I'm going to leave it there. I want to hear your feedback. dailydetroit@gmail.com or 313-789-3211. Obviously, this won't be the end of this conversation. I want to hear what people think. Obviously, people have no problem telling us we're wrong.
Yeah, and that's fine.
That's fine.
That's fine. These are our opinions. But I would love to hear your opinions because, again, as I've said many times, I'm not an expert. I would love to hear back from everybody to see what are some of your ideas to hope that we can improve the population of the region.
With that, I am Jer Stays.
I'm Norris Howard.
Thank you so much for listening to Your Daily Detroit. Your support matters. Patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Don't make me look so crazy for staying. It'd be absolutely great to have you on board. We've got the rocks classes. We're going to be doing a lot more. And little tease, we're going to have a new website soon.
Yes.
Thank you, Engineer Randy. We're going to actually do a whole thing on this. But for now, thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.